Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. With Nyck de Vries underperforming right now in the AlphaTauri, rumours are emerging that Red Bull have given him 3 races to turn his season around, and if he can't, he is out of that car mid-season and somewhere is going to replace him. Rumour has it that that man might well be Daniel Ricciardo, returning to a Formula 1 seat for the first time since last season. Will this happen? Does he want that seat? Would Red Bull actually do this and kick de Vries out mid-season? They certainly have a history of doing similar things. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. So just yesterday we heard the rumours that at Silverstone and potentially later in the year at Monza, Ricciardo will be in the RB19 to do a Pirelli test, and he wants to prove, as he says here, he wants to prove that this guy still has it. He's not just hanging around, he's not just a test driver. I know that if I put in a good performance, it won't go unnoticed. In the end, I just want them to say what we just mentioned. So look, he wants to get back on the grid. He had a chance to probably this season in the Haas, but didn't want to drive a backmarker car, or at least, not a exactly particularly competitive car. You can understand that perspective. So why would he join the AlphaTauri? That's a different story because they're connected to Red Bull, and we'll explain that here in a second. So Yuki Tsunoda has been one of my drivers of the season so far. Has been killing it in the AlphaTauri, but fundamentally Nyck de Vries has had a really tough time. We'll have a look at his placements here in a second, right? And I think many that knew of Nyck de Vries' history and like how he'd won, what he'd won previously, weren't really expecting much of him. And yes, he's a rookie, but he is like 28. He's not exactly a young driver where his mistakes, such as Sargent's, let's say, would be more forgivable. So look, there's been a few moments. Firstly, he was just slow at the start of the season and Tsunoda was out qualifying and out racing him, and then he turned up to Baku, binned it in the wall. This was, I think, in one of the qualifying sessions, I guess, and then he even took out Tsunoda. Well, he didn't take out Tsunoda, but he crashed into Tsunoda during the sprint race. That caused Tsunoda's front wing to kind of collapse, then he crashed it into the wall, so he didn't help his teammate out on that front. And then on the Sunday, he then crashed it into the wall again, broke his front suspension and was out of the Grand Prix. So that wasn't a great showing. And then just last weekend in Miami, he actually out-qualified Tsunoda for the first time of the season. But I thought, okay, de Vries, maybe he's actually going to have a decent weekend here. Then the very first corner locks up, sends it into the back of Lando Norris, and kind of surprising, I think this wasn't punished in some way, because it was clearly his fault. He admitted fault for it. Norris said, "What are you doing, mate? Brake a bit earlier." So not been a good season so far. His actual race results are 14th, 15th, and obviously in Australia there was loads of DNFs anyway. A DNF in Azerbaijan, and then 18th in Miami. So hasn't been particularly spectacular, especially when compared to Yuki Tsunoda. And yes, Tsunoda was needed to perform this year, let's be honest, right? Couple of years on that car, been getting better and better. This year needed to turn up and deliver a good performance, has done exactly that. His consistency has been admirable, and yeah, for some reason he's behind Zhou in the championship because Zhou got a P9 and Tsunoda has 2 P10s, but he's been killing it so far this season. Now, Red Bull have a history of when drivers aren't performing, obviously they own AlphaTauri, formerly Toro Rosso, right, but Red Bull still call the shots. They have a history of getting rid of drivers, and if de Vries continues to underperform, that is exactly what they will do. And Helmut Marko, he's had enough already, it seems. We are 5 races into the year, and Helmut Marko has apparently given de Vries 3 more races to turn his season around and improve his performance, and if he can't, someone's going to come into that seat instead. I was surprised fundamentally when they gave de Vries the seat. Of course, last year, Albon was unwell, had appendicitis or whatever it was. De Vries stepped into the car, the Williams, right, in Monza. Probably the easiest track to drive, you could well argue that at least, in a Williams, fast in a straight line, got P9, destroyed Latifi. So obviously that made people think he was actually pretty good, but there's obviously caveats in place. He started out the season very poorly, and he kind of had all the stars aligned, I think, for him to get this seat. And maybe Red Bull thought, you know what, in a couple of years' time, Perez is going to move on from the Red Bull seat. If de Vries actually turned out to be quite good, we could lean even more into the Orange Army, right, with Max and de Vries, both Dutch drivers, of course, get them in the team together. That'd be a nice dynamic. De Vries is never going to be challenging Verstappen, right, in terms of pace, so maybe they thought that was a viable option. It's become quite clear that de Vries isn't really the caliber of driver that they would be looking for the longer term, so why keep him around? Why not make another change at AlphaTauri, given that, the car's pretty bad, the AlphaTauri. It's not really helping Red Bull, apart from to develop future drivers for their program. So next up is Imola, then Monaco, then Barcelona. So the pressure is on de Vries. If he can't at least match or will get closer to Tsunoda over those 3 races. He's expected to be replaced by someone else, potentially Riccardo, shortly after that. Maybe for Canada, maybe for Silverstone, who knows. But in that ballpark, there could be a change, and we've seen it before, right? Absolutely, this has been the case with Red Bull, certainly during the Kvyat for, I mean, even back in the day, right, 2005, they were playing at it, but certainly Kvyat, Verstappen 2016, and then shortly after that, Gasly, Albon 2019, even with their main team, and that's not even including what that meant for the Toro Rosso sister team, I suppose, as it is for the Red Bull. Now, this has been noted over the last day or so that Daniel Ricciardo has been having a seat fit in the AlphaTauri. Does this mean he's joining? Not necessarily, right? We know that Ricciardo, as the test reserve driver, kind of shares that role with Liam Lawson to some respects, and we'll talk about him in a second. So, yeah, they might need AlphaTauri at some point, just in case it was necessary, a replacement driver. So it's good for Ricciardo just to get a seat fit in if he was to have to replace him. So that doesn't say the whole story, but it is interesting, right, with the timing of this, especially because I'm sure Helmut Marko isn't particularly happy with the way things have been going. So yeah, he's been to AlphaTauri for a seat fit, and the rumour is now emerging that if De Vries is kicked out after the Spanish Grand Prix after failing to deliver for the next 3 races, Ricciardo is the most likely man to come in, and he is apparently very willing to take that AlphaTauri seat. Now you might wonder, and I think understandably, why did he not want to go for the Haas seat or anything last season when now he wants to go for the AlphaTauri? To me, it's a different story. We know that Steiner actually reached out to Ricciardo, but Danny Rick doesn't want to go into a team that's, 7th through 10th, 6th through 10th. He wants to drive a car towards the front, either a Red Bull, potentially a Mercedes, a Ferrari, even an Alpine, right? Because he's not going to be joining Aston Martin because Stroll is not going anywhere. So Ricciardo wants to prove that he is still a driver of that caliber. Now, joining Haas would have meant signing a deal, potentially, leaving the program at Red Bull. This is the perfect chance for Daniel Ricciardo to prove that, first of all, he's much better than De Vries if he was to take the seat, to compete with Tsunoda, and if not beat Tsunoda if he could, and maintain that relationship with Red Bull, right? I mean, it's kind of the perfect situation for Ricciardo that he gets to step in mid-season, try and really prove himself in that car, take it to Tsunoda, and if he can then prove to the rest of the grid that actually he's still a competitive driver, then he's not tied to AlphaTauri for the following season. He could well either go into the Red Bull starting seat or go somewhere else, right? So I think this is kind of ideal for Ricciardo in some ways, that he's not tied down to staying with this backmarker team, but yet he can still prove that he's got what it takes in a car like that, because Tsunoda's still able to get points. So if Danny Rick was able to pick up some decent points as well at times and prove that he's still got that racecraft and that ability that we saw McLaren, then he can actually be in with a shot of getting a seat somewhere else on the grid. And I don't think he will get that seat without a chance like this and making the most of it. Now, the question is, though, is Daniel Ricciardo really the man that Red Bull as a starting team want as their kind of second driver to Verstappen over the coming years? Because they've got Yuki Tsunoda potentially ready to graduate at some point up to the starting team. They've also got Liam Lawson. He's probably the jewel in all of their drivers they've got through their academy project. He's currently racing in Super Formula over in Japan, and that's usually what Helmut Marko likes to do for his drivers that he believes are just about to take the step up into Formula 1, and he's been doing a great job out there. So, the question is, and there's even rumours now from ESPN, that he's not being lined up to replace Nyck de Vries at AlphaTauri at present. That could change. Daniel Ricciardo could well be the man. Apparently he's interested, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is, but if you're Helmut Marko, do you bring back Ricciardo? Do you put Liam Lawson in as the kind of next generation? That's a debate to be had. And obviously there's also the risk, if you're Ricciardo, that Yuki Tsunoda has been familiar with that car for the last few years. You go into that seat, Tsunoda cooks you a little bit, and all of a sudden your reputation is destroyed, and it's GG for your attempted return into Formula 1. But if he doesn't take up this chance, if it does arrive for him, then I don't really think there is any way back into F1 for Daniel Ricciardo. He needs to take this chance if it does arrive and make the most of it if he wants to make a return. It may not arrive. As I say, there's other options out there. There's plenty of other drivers Red Bull have in their academy to choose from if they wanted to replace Nyck de Vries mid-season, and I think all signs point towards that probably will be the case. Unless he turns around his season drastically, that's what's going to happen. Whether Ricciardo's the man, that is still very much up in the air. And tweet your thoughts in the comments below. A few things to close out the video here with. First of all, are you excited, baby? We've got another street circuit coming up. Maybe not, but Madrid are very interested in taking over the Spanish Grand Prix from the circuit Barcelona to Catalonia, whatever exactly it's called, which is, I think it's a pretty good track, to be honest, the Catalonia circuit. circuit, especially with the changes they're making. But apparently they want to move it to Madrid, or at least maybe have the Spanish Grand Prix alternate. I don't know. But here we go. It's another fantastic street circuit. Doesn't this look really fun? In fairness, it's not right in the city centre, but this does not look like a good track layout. I'm not really sure where the overtaking opportunities even really are. A couple of times they just go round a roundabout, like we're on, you know, the Vuelta La España or whatever it's called. So the cycling race, right? So I mean, man, I don't know what to even think anymore. Hopefully no more street circuits. I know that everybody's fed up of them, but still, there's proposals from everyone. Like, please come to our city and do a street race here. We'll pay you all this money. So look, it's probably not going to happen, but hopefully it doesn't. That's all I'll say on that one. And just one final quite important update here from Aston Martin. We saw the other day that Mercedes have apparently figured out a solution to increase the effectiveness of their DRS efficiency that Red Bull has been the best at by far on the grid so far this season. Aston Martin were one of the worst, but they may have figured things out quicker than other teams because Mercedes are planning, I think, for Canada to bring an upgrade that will allow them to gain extra advantage from their DRS. But actually, Aston Martin gained heavily from this with their new update. So they brought a brand new rear wing in Baku, and since then, they had very similar DRS efficiency metrics to the Red Bulls. That's very impressive, actually, from Aston Martin, and if that maintains itself going forwards, that will be of huge advantage to them for the rest of the season. Their straight line speed still isn't as good, but in terms of benefit from DRS, they're actually now right up there with Red Bull, which is very impressive, and other teams will need to replicate this advantage over time if they really want to compete at the business end of the field. But very much interested to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.